What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the new Ford GT and my BMW M2. Now, as you've probably read in my title, today I have a question for you guys. If you had 50,000 euros, which of these two cars would you buy? A brand new Mustang GT or a slightly used BMW M2 facelift? And I actually considered the Mustang GT when I was searching for my new car. And at the end of this video, I'm gonna tell you the reasons why I went for the M2 instead, even though I absolutely love the Mustang. But first, let's talk about the specs. The Mustang is bigger in every way compared to the M2. It's wider, taller and 30mm longer than the BMW. You can tell that as soon as you see the two cars side by side. But anyway, specs. The BMW M2 is powered by a 3-liter inline 6-cylinder turbocharged engine capable of producing 370 horsepower and 500 Nm of torque. The Mustang, on the other hand, has a 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 engine with 460 horsepower and 570 Nm of torque. Two quite different beasts, but both engines are absolutely superb for what they're designed for. But even so, their performance figures are pretty similar. Both cars are front-engined and rear-wheel driven. They both feature sportier front and rear bumpers, 19-inch alloys and quad exhausts at the back. And speaking about those, let's hear some noise. Now, before we jump into the interior of these cars and drive them back to back, I want to clear up any confusion you might have. This is not an attempt to compare these two cars. This is simply a showcase of what 50,000 euros can get you nowadays. So now let's see the interiors. Here we are in the facelifted Mustang's new interior, and things have changed quite a bit compared to the old car. It now has an 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system. You can now spec the car with a fully digital instrument cluster, and gone is the old 6-speed automatic transmission, and it's now been replaced with the new 10-speed gearbox. This particular car also has these awesome Recaro sport seats, a heated steering wheel and a quite excellent Shaker Pro sound system. But how does this interior compare to that in the M2? The M2's interior is much simpler than the Mustang's, and despite being bigger on the outside, the Ford is not as spacious on the inside as the BMW. My 7-year-old son fits quite well in the back of the M2, while in the Mustang there's not enough legroom. I wouldn't even ask two adults to sit in the back unless it's a 30-minute drive. The other difference is that the Mustang seems to have more soft touch materials on the inside. There's some on the door panels, some in the lower parts of the dash, and the seats are made of actual leather as opposed to the ones you'll find in the BMW. Plus, you can spec the Ford with proper bucket seats and a fully digital instrument cluster. Options that are not available for the M2. Other than that, the interiors are pretty similar. Both can be equipped with either a manual or an automatic transmission, both have touchscreen navigation systems, plenty of storage spaces, and both feature pretty good quality materials on the inside.
Unfortunately, when you get these Recaro sport seats, you lose the heating and ventilation functionalities. And you really have to think long and hard if you're willing to spend 1,800 euros and also trade in those functionalities for these seats. And if you're on the heavier side like I am, I wouldn't go for these seats. They're too narrow for us fluffy guys, I'm sorry, but that's just true. But yeah, the new Mustang has taken quite a big leap forward quality-wise on the interior, but let's not waste any more time talking about these things and put these two cars head to head. You already know what the M2 can do. You've seen the full specs of this car, you've seen the full review of it, and you've also seen me put it against a DSG Golf R. If you didn't see any of those videos, I'll make sure to link them right below the like button. But every time I jump into this car, I remember why I bought this car in the first place and why after 1 year of ownership, I still love it just as much as I did on the first day I drove it. It just handles great. It's sharp, it's planted on the road, the engine is superb, it packs a lot of punch, it sounds great, the steering is nice and meaty, and this car is just the perfect size to throw around these bends over here. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the M2 was built for roads such as these. But what wasn't really made for such roads is the other car in this video. The Mustang GT. This is more of a cruiser car, a GT car, hence the name, not a long distance cruiser, because this car eats up fuel at a level I've never witnessed before in my life. It makes the M5 I drove earlier this year look like an eco-friendly car. But really, when the engine sounds and goes the way this one does, it doesn't really matter in the end. Just listen to the way this engine sounds all the way up to the red line. So how does the Mustang compare to the M2? Well, straight line accelerations are pretty much identical. The GT does 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 4.3 seconds with the 10-speed automatic and 4.8 seconds with the manual, while the M2 does it in 4.3 seconds for the DCT and 4.5 seconds for the manual. And what those numbers show you is just how good automatics are getting nowadays. But this is where the similarities end between the two cars. Because like I've said previously, the M2 is a real driver's car with sharp handling and stiff suspension, and the Mustang GT is quite the opposite. Its suspension is quite comfortable no matter what driving mode you're in. flings quite a bit in the corners. And the steering is kind of lifeless. But surprisingly, you do sit lower in the GT compared to the M2, and the seats just hug you more than those in the BMW.
Interestingly, the Ford is more customizable than the BMW. You have a separate switch to change the steering weight, a separate one for the exhaust, and then you have a third one for the driving modes. In the M2, on the other hand, you only have 3 driving modes, and once you cycle through them, they alter the engine response, steering weight, and the way the exhaust sounds. But unlike in the Mustang, the M2 exhaust doesn't sound louder in different modes. It just adds more burbles, crackles, and pops.
And also, around town, in the GT, the visibility is kind of poor because of this huge A-pillar right here that's kind of close to your face. The M2 doesn't have that problem, plus it's more roomier on the inside.
But what I want to end today's video with is a question. Which of these 2 performance cars would you buy for 50,000 euros and why? Let me know in the comment section down below.
So finally, the question is, why did I buy a BMW M2 and not a Ford Mustang GT? Well, it's simply because I prefer a sports car rather than a GT car. Simple as that. I love everything that the Mustang represents. I think it's a way cooler car than the M2 is. It has a more characterful and better sounding engine, but where it matters to me, B-road blasting, the M2 is simply the better car. So this has been it for today's video, my friends. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I want to give a huge thank you to Ford Sweden for lending me the Mustang to film these videos for you guys. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it and subscribe for plenty more videos to come. And until next time, take good care of yourselves and I'll see you around.